Hi, welcome to my channel. I'm Nat, and today I will be doing my January wrap-up, so let's get right into it. I read a lot this month. 6 books, 3 fiction and 3 nonfiction is quite a lot for me. To start with the nonfiction, we have a big one, and that is 6 of Crows. This is Booktube's baby, and I finally got to read this together with the Incatcher's Book Club, and I have a lot of opinions. I think that definitely this book deserves some of the hype, or a lot of the hype that it's getting, but there is definitely a few problematic areas that I am going to touch upon together with the book club in my probably next video. We're filming a special one with a lot of people and a lot of guests, etc. So I'm hoping to make it really exciting and really cool, and you can check it out. I will link it once it's available up in the cards or down below. But for those of you who don't know, probably should start with that. This is essentially a fantasy heist book, for lack of a better word. A completely new world, very similar to our own, I might add. And in it, we meet Kaz Brecker, Ine, Jesper, and a couple of other characters that are recruited for various purposes to commit a heist. Because they have the special abilities needed for that, and they live in Ketterdam, which is very heavily inspired by Amsterdam, they take on this deal, and this is the story of that, essentially. Very briefly, because again, like I said, I'll keep everything for the big, large video that's coming up soon. I think that this book, the positives of it are definitely the bants and the found family element, which very heavily reminded me of fanfiction, and I'm going to get very in-depth about this during the large review. But essentially, this is the kind of thing that you would read fanfiction about in established tropes and in established series and movies and various other media. I really enjoy that. It hit that fluffy kind of, this is that group of friends that you always want to have and that you always want to go and explore with, and you're able to do this in this book. So that is a definite win. I really like the description as well. I think the way that Bardugo describes a lot of the stuff is very engaging and immerses you in the world very quickly, without, overpowering it, basically. So that was a definite win. However, one of the negatives that personally I do have is that, and probably the biggest negative, is I think the character ages are slightly unrealistic. Or in other words, I think this book shouldn't be classified as young adult fiction. I had a discussion about this in one of the comments of my previous YouTube videos about what makes young adult fiction young adult, but essentially it seems here that the only thing that makes this young adult is the fact that they're 17 years old, 17, 18. That's it. Everything else is, you could swap over their ages to 24, 25, 28, 30 even, for a very particular set of characters, and it would make more sense, actually, for the actions that they're taking. The fact that they are young and kids grow up very quickly, and this is a different world, I don't know. But in general, I will give this 5 stars, even though for me personally it was probably like 4.75, 4.65, but the bants won me over. Honestly, the fact that it hit that spot won me over. Now coming on to the second book of the month, and that was Stormwake by Lucy Christopher. Now I have all of Lucy Christopher's books besides this one, so when I found it at the library, I was very happy. It was just a pleasant surprise because it was on my radar, but I was also not really sold on the premise because this is essentially the retelling of The Tempest, and sad to say I haven't read The Tempest by William Shakespeare, and it's on my to-read list after this book. But going into this book, I didn't really know what the premise could be, especially because retellings are I feel like they might be overdone or not done well enough. But here it is. I very much enjoyed it. I'm very happy that I found it and picked it up, and I gave it 4 stars out of 5. The premise for this one is that there is Moss, a girl who lives with her father, Pa, on an island, and the rest of the world has been consumed by flood, and the father does this weekly ritual of sending magical flower petals out into the ocean to help the floods recede. However, after the coming of a different boy, Cal, being washed up on the shore, as well as growing up and becoming more curious, Moss realizes that actually the island isn't exactly what it seems, and there might be more to the story that Pa is telling than she previously believed. I don't want to say more without spoiling it, but I definitely agree with what the author said in her acknowledgements, that she wanted to make a book about adventuring and exploring and discovering. And I think this was done exceptionally well, considering the character themes that are further explored in the book. The things that I liked were the descriptions. Definitely a winner. I think her mood setting is very, very well done, that you get immersed into whatever scene that she writes you in. And I think the pacing of the book is done quite well, considering the actual theme and plot of it. Now, coming on to dislikes, I really can't pinpoint exactly what I didn't like about this book or why I'm not giving it 5 stars, but it just feels like something about it was lacking. Either the development of maybe a couple of the characters, maybe it was the not even the language, the slang that the author implemented in, conveying slang between the characters, etc. Maybe it was just the absence. Again, something seems to be missing, especially for what she says that she's meant to be doing, which is discovery and adventure. Like, it just is missing that little bit, but that doesn't stop it from being a really, really great book, and I would 100% recommend this book, probably over some of her other ones, because I have all of them back here, actually. And she wrote Stolen, and that was a very, very deep, very odd kind of book where you like the characters and like the relationship in a way that they have between them, but it's very toxic and very, very unhealthy, and there's just so much wrong with it. And then you have Fly Away, which is a very peculiar kind of book, very mystical. And then there's Killing Woods, which is a mystery thriller that introduced me. It was one of my introductory books into the genre, but I feel like she is a lot better at these types of books, where there's an element of mysticism, or an element of longing, or an element of discovery. So I can definitely recommend this book. 100%. The third fiction book of the month is Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. I got this book from my mom and dad because this is a book about Singapore, or involves Singapore. Now, I've spent 3.5 years of my life living in Singapore, and I definitely gave an extra star to this book because of the fact that it invokes a lot of nostalgia in me, and a lot of the slang and food that just brought me back and made me miss it a whole lot. But overall, I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was good. It was a good book. I would recommend it. So the premise of this book is that it's about Rachel Chu, an American-born Chinese living in New York with her boyfriend Nick, when Nick invites her over to meet his family in Singapore. Now, what Rachel doesn't know is the fact that Nick is from a crazy rich Asian family where they have wealth beyond all measure, and that it has this slew of dynamics and family rivalries and who has more money type of thing. So the story follows her and how she discovers this about her boyfriend, and how she is introduced into this world together with the reader. What I liked about this book is the fact that it introduced us into the world in a very organic way through a character who's also not aware of it. I also 100% really enjoyed all the mentions about Singapore. The food, again, and the slang especially, though visually from a location perspective is not actually that much. The negatives of this book, and why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Now, the first thing is that writing-wise, Kevin was a bit liberal in how he wrote point of views. You would be switching point of views in the middle of the chapter several times. So you would be reading, like, Rachel was looking at this, Rachel was looking at that, all of a sudden Nick is looking at Rachel, and you're just like, whoa, that's not happening. I mean, that is a markedly sloppy way of writing, and you're always encouraged to avoid that, because it, 1, confuses the reader, and 2, just shows that you're not able to control the scene from that one particular character, and he does this a lot. So I definitely couldn't 100% enjoy the immersion because of that. Number 2 is, it felt like in trying to make it rich and crazy, the author alienated you as well, because a lot of the brands and stuff that he mentions, or you know, the inlays, etc., I just can't imagine them because I have never experienced that or looked at those types of items. So it's kind of like, this is expensive. A good way of putting it is, it feels like he's saying this is expensive in more ways than one by just giving brand names and brand names and brand names, and that's essentially the whole entire book. And that, especially in the beginning, took away from me enjoying the book because I was really trying to get into it, but I'm just assaulted with these, I want to say Gucci, but at least I know what that is, but like these, yeah. It was very hard, it was very wordy for what he was trying to say. And I guess maybe that is a weakness, because as an author he couldn't convey that rich feel of the book without going into just relying on brand names. And the third one, of course, is the fact that actually Singapore is nothing like this. You know, there is definitely the 1%, and they exist everywhere in the world, Singapore included. But take it from me, this is definitely not how people live in Singapore. There is no, like, massively hidden estate anywhere. I would be amazed if people were not able to find things in Singapore. But yes, it is quite amusing in that aspect, but I really did want to find something which was more closer to Singapore as the way that I know it. It has ignited my desire to read more about Singapore, and I'm definitely going to be looking more into its literature. I laugh because I just remembered Singapore Ghost Stories, which was something that we read in primary school, and it was banned from everywhere because I went to an Anglican school, you know. Religion, ghosts don't exist. Yeah, maybe you might want to check out and see how that held up over the years. So I would recommend this book, but I wouldn't go into it expecting a literary masterpiece or an understanding of how Singapore society works. That is the end of fiction for the month of January, and now coming on to the nonfiction, which will be slightly faster since I can't really summarize the book fully. But we'll start with the first book that I finished in the month, and that was The Virgin Way by Richard Branson. If you don't know who Richard Branson is, he is the founder of the Virgin Company, which has stuff like Virgin Trains, Virgin Galactic, Virgin Orbit, and a plethora of others. And this is a book written by him talking about leadership. Now, straight away, I can say that I appreciate the fact that somebody, or he sat down and he wrote this book, because I feel you can tell that he was the one writing this book. If just because it faffs a bit in places, you know, it goes on about nothing really in particular, or he repeats things, but it does give it that certain charm. I like this book for the fact that I discovered one thing new to me in it, at least, and I think that for nonfiction, if you learn something, even if that's something very, very small, or it reminds you of something, then that immediately makes the book good. Nonfiction is mostly here to teach you, right? To teach you about the world and the different things that we interact with. For that reason, I already think quite highly of this book for a nonfiction book, and I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The negatives definitely is that some people might find it a bit, again, too faffy, a bit too common sense. Maybe you would have read a lot of these anecdotes in newspapers, or I know that there's another book on Virgin, so I'm not sure how much of an overlap there is between them. But I think that it's interesting to see where successful people come from, and it allows you to forego comparing yourself to these people word for word, or like dot for dot, sentence for sentence, because as he says himself, he started off way back. He dropped out of school when this was possible. He got successful, let's put it this way. Richard Branson became successful in a time when it was easier to do so, when you didn't have as much red tape, where you weren't obliged to go to school to become successful from just building an empire, because now it's all about tech, right? Like, if you want to do that, then it's probably still possible in the tech industry, but he started by doing a student newspaper. Like, he dropped out to do a student newspaper, which then evolved into just building businesses upon businesses, etc. But I would say that if you're interested in Richard Branson or Virgin, then it's worth a read, and I found this a very easy read for a nonfiction book, so I would recommend. And I think some of the tips that he does give, as common sense as they are, for example, carry around a notebook everywhere, all of a sudden you go like, well, why don't I do that? Or maybe I should, and this will bring me this and this and this benefit. So I would give it a read. Would recommend. The second nonfiction book that I read in January was The Mackenzie Way by Ethan Raziel. McKinsey is a huge consulting company. Okay, I'm gonna say one of the biggest, or at least one of the most well-known consulting companies in the world, which you might not know if you're not in consulting, but they are basically the cream of the cream in the consulting world. So they're comparable to a lot of the like top law firms, etc. And they have obviously their own methodology and their own way of doing things. That makes them so successful. I would call this a taster book because Ethan here is a previous employee of McKinsey, and he just kind of breaks down what the bare essence of McKinsey into kind of how they strategize meetings or how they approach a case, how to survive McKinsey, how to interview clients, etc. For a taster book to just, dip your toe into it, it's a good book. It's very, very easily digestible. It's broken down into these really interesting paragraph sections that I like because you can just read 2 or 3 on like every morning, which is what I did. It introduces you to some concepts that you might not have heard of before, like for example the waterfall chart, which I've for the first time in my life saw during this master's program. Actually, I think a lot more people need to use it because it makes numbers and everything a lot easier. If, for example, it mentions the MECE method or the MECE, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that. MECE? The MECE method. So it's how to think about breaking down normal questions or things that you have to do to make sure that you break them down to the point where you don't do overlapping work. That was really cool. Of course, it has some really weird tips like, oh, if you're traveling, then this is what you pack, or this is how you deal with people. It also does a lot of advertisement of the McKinsey company, and you hear a lot about how many hours they work. Let's put it this way, that if you work at McKinsey, you sell your soul. I would say there's definitely an American flair to this book. But bottom line, I think that if you are looking into consulting, or you're wondering what consulting is, or you're particularly interested about this company, this isn't a bad book to pick up whatsoever. So I think I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, maybe 4 out of 5, I'm not sure. Probably 3 out of 5, but I would recommend if this is something that you would want to look into. And the last book is Ikigai. Now, if you've seen my previous video, my brother gifted to me the ABC Book Lovers box, which is a mystery box where it's curated especially for you, for the genres that you pick, and then delivered to your house, wrapped up, and then you open them up. And it's basically book gacha, and it's amazing, and I had a lot of joy opening up all of these books, but I decided since January is my birthday month, it is definitely the month that I should sit down and read a book that is about, supposed to be giving you the secrets to a long and happy life. So I think that this is a great taster book. Whether it's a taster book for Ikigai, that's a bit debatable. I think that Ikigai, which is the method, it's apparently, and I say apparently because I feel like translations are sometimes done very, very liberally, especially when it comes to Japanese, Chinese, Korean. This is a method of living life where you find your meaning, or you discover your meaning or your purpose and your Ikigai. You discover your Ikigai, your thing that you're happy doing, that you're good at doing, that you can earn money from. That is what you are meant to do as a person for some part of your life. You can have more than one Ikigai. I would have liked to hear more about that, if I'm frank, because the way that it starts off is that it talks about actually living for a very long time. A lot of this book deals with long life, and I feel like I learned a lot about the background literature for that researches long life, and I really want to read a book that was mentioned here about blue zones, a densely populated area with long living people like centarians, etc., or super centarians. I appreciated that being added in. I don't think that it was directly related to Ikigai though. So in the end, it felt like I was reading a book that was trying to fatten itself up without going too much into researching what Ikigai actually is, or, where did it originate, or how are people practicing it now, or more examples of just Japanese people telling you about what it is. There are some interviews in here, but that definitely wasn't enough to capture the essence of it, I feel. This book is a great taster book, but I would not walk away from it thinking that I have found everything I need to know about Ikigai, or even like half of what I want to know about Ikigai. It is, I would say it's a great birthday present for sure, because it deals with stuff that you might not normally think about. If you're able to get it, if you're able to get it in the library or somewhere, I would, you're not losing anything by reading this. And I think you will become curious about a lot of things, but not but you won't specifically learn about Ikigai, let's put it this way. I feel like that was a very, very long video. I'm so sorry, I probably rambled about these books for quite a while. Editing me is gonna have a lot of fun, but the video isn't over yet because I need to mention my carry-ons, which are kind of not carry-ons. I started them in February, so the last 2 days, and I'm just gonna stick them in because, yeah, this is already definitely what I'm reading on. So the first book is fiction. It's not even really a book, it's a comic, and it is Raven by Cami Garcia and Gabriela Piccolo. I got this comic from my brother, and it's because we both like Teen Titans, and the Titans series that was on Netflix, season 1 was something, honestly. So this is about the DC universe, about a character called Raven, and hopefully in the future we're going to encounter Starfire and Robin, which are just like, ah. But yeah, I think Gabriel Piccolo's art is really good, it's really smooth, it's really nice, and, you know, a universe that you really like. It's a story that I kind of know because it's Raven's origin story have been rehashed in so many ways. But the drawings are really good. I like the way that it looks. And for my nonfiction read in February, I guess, and the stuff that's carried on, I have started this chunky book, which is The Guide to Intellectual Property by The Economist. I am a lawyer. I want to know more things about the law, and I haven't really had any connection or any reason to look into intellectual property, but it feels as we get onto the digital age, or when it comes to valuation of companies, goodwill and trademarks and these intangible assets make up a lot of the company's value. So it's both necessary for, I feel, me as an economist and me as a lawyer, so I decided to take a look at it. There's really isn't much to say. It's about intellectual property and what it is, the different types, what kind of regulation is in place. Yeah, pretty much. I think I might actually have to pick a different non-fiction book as well to read simultaneously because this one is very, very dense. Maybe something history or other. So yeah, that is it. The last thing that I am going to add on is that our February book of the month for the Incatchers Book Club is Crooked Kingdom. I have the book. I'm just not going to get up and get it because I'm really tired. We read Six of Crows. It's time to read the sequel, which some people even say is better than the first one. And I really hope that's the case because I'm ready, you know, I'm ready to be into it and not have that like 0.5 stars absent in the back of my mind. So we'll see how it goes. If you want to join, you know where to find it. It's the Discord server is linked in the description. You can come and join. If you've read it, you can, you know, watch us be frustrated early on. If you haven't read it, then you can come and read it with us. We pick a different book every single month, and then we discuss it on camera with some of the members of the book club. So that's it. That's the end of the video. I am really surprised at how many people have found this channel somehow. I'm not sure. Was it like a comment or something? Like, where were you guys coming from? I'm really happy because it means that there's more potential friends out there and more interaction. If you want to let me know where you came from, that'd be really cool to know. If you're new to my channel or if you're watching this video somehow, you are free to like and subscribe to the video. I actually find it really strange to ask because it always seems, you know, why would you ask if your content is that good? But I'm gonna let you know that I was watching a video the other day and somebody in the middle of it or at the end of it or at some point in the video, not at the beginning is just awful, at some point in the video said, please subscribe, and I'm like, oh yeah, I should probably do that. So I guess it works. So yeah, feel free to like, subscribe, let me know what you thought of the video, and if you've read any of these books or you are looking forward to reading any of these books. I hope you're staying warm, staying cozy, staying safe. You've got this. Have a nice week, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.